The October 2024 edition of Talking with Todd. It's such a beautiful day in Northeast Ohio. And as always, I appreciate you joining me for these conversations, particularly on such a beautiful weather day. Much appreciated. So, by now, you've received the link to my annual budget message. And if you did not receive it, it's really easy to find. You just go to the kent.edu/president, and then you'll see a pull down menu labeled communications, and you'll see the annual budget message there. So, as you know, every year that I've been president, we've published this annual budget message to give you a fairly detailed description of what's happening with the finances of the university. And I know that this is a really long budget message. I know there's a lot of detail. I know it's complicated. I'd say that that complication and length is in part the cost of transparency. And this year we really tried to include some helpful summaries and some key takeaways. So really today, my remarks, which may last a little longer than usual, will be sort of a visual/audio summary of the budget message, and then leave time for your questions, and I will do my best to answer them. So I just want to begin by saying that it's an interesting moment for all of us, and it's an interesting challenge for me as president of Kent State right now, because on the one hand, so many great things are happening at Kent State. I mean, we have very high retention rates. Our graduation rates are reaching record heights. I had lunch a week or so ago with a dozen student leaders on the Kent campus, and they were so impressive. And we had such a wonderful conversation, and I came away from that conversation just so thankful that I serve as the president of a university that has students that are such empathetic and deep thinking individuals. It really made my day. It made my semester. And even with these financial headwinds, we've been able to give raises to both our collectively bargained faculty and staff, and as well as our non-represented faculty and staff. We've been able to do that in each of the last 3 years. It was a struggle to afford it for the non-representative, but we did. And some great things are happening in terms of strategic investments we have made. So one of them is, when I was just finishing up as provost, we created a fully blown engineering program. We had engineering technology. We didn't have engineering. So kudos to Dean Christina Blowbaum and her team. They have now stood up bachelor's through PhD programs in engineering, and we have expanded enrollment noticeably on the Kent campus and in our engineering degrees. So that was a good investment that's paying off. And then enrollment in our American Academy program in Brazil has far exceeded our initial expectations. And as a reminder, those are Brazilian students who study at our partner university. They're taught by Kent State professors in English. They earn a Kent State associate's degree. Then they can either finish in Brazil or they can come to Kent. And both enrollment in Brazil and subsequent Brazilian student enrollment at Kent has far exceeded our expectations. So many great things are happening at Kent State University. We really are on a roll at Kent State. Our campuses look great, and thanks to everyone involved that makes those campuses look great. And then at the same time, a particular challenge is we have these financial headwinds. And so at the same time that to be fully transparent and to communicate clearly our budgetary situation, then I have to, at the same time that we talk about how great things are happening at Kent State, we also have to talk then about our challenges. And so I just want to give you a short review of how this financial situation emerged and the forces driving that. Then I want to address a couple of matters involving the budget and our actions, and then I'll just finish up, and then we'll have some question and answers. And And again, thanks for joining us. Okay, so I've started thinking about our situation as a three-dimensional squeeze. Well, or just that there are three things squeezing us at once that's produced this situation. And the first squeeze is enrollment driven by demographics. So the demographics in the nutshell are fewer high school graduates, particularly in Northeast Ohio, combined with lower rates of going to college. So in Northeast Ohio, we have fewer students who are graduating from high school. And in the last 3 or 4 years, certainly since COVID, a decline in the percentage of those high school graduates who decide to enroll in a university. So I was reading an article last week in the Columbus Dispatch about population in Ohio and predictions of population in Ohio until 2050. And so according to this article in the Columbus Dispatch, between now and 2050, 50, whereas the population of the U.S. is expected to grow by 17%, the population of Ohio is expected to decline by nearly 6%. And then Northeast Ohio has noticeably higher rates of decline of population. So the projection for Summit County is a population decline of 16.3% by 2050. For Cuyahoga County, the projected population decline is 18.5%, 18.5. Stark County, a decline of 15%. Portage County, where our Kent campus resides, projected decline of nearly 12%. And of course, we have campuses throughout and programs throughout all of these counties. So if you think about enrollment trends on the Kent campus, we have exactly the same enrollment today in 2024 as we did in 2009. Same enrollment, fall 2024 compared to fall 2009 on the Kent campus. However, we also now have 25% more occupied space on the Kent campus for the same number of students. Our regionals since 2015 have experienced a 50% decline in degree-seeking enrollment. So 50% fewer degree-seeking students than in 2015. Now, College Credit Plus enrollment is up on our regional campuses. We love College Credit Plus. It's part of our mission of access. We love those high school students that take classes from us. By state law, they pay a much lower tuition, or I should say the school districts reimburse us at a much lower tuition. It's basically a 70% discount. And so at best, with our costs, at best, we break even on a College Credit Plus student. And depending on when and how it's taught, we definitely could lose revenue by teaching them. We love College Credit Plus, but it's not funded in a mechanism that allows us to recover cost. Okay. So squeeze number one is enrollment driven by different demographics. That's number one. All right, our second of three squeezes is the tuition, room, and board cohort model that the legislature passed about 7 or 8 years ago. And the impact of this model on our finances has been dramatic. I don't know, in the 12 years I've been here, I'm going to say it might be the single biggest change in our circumstances since I joined Kent State in 2012. It might be the single biggest change in the financing of Kent State by the state in the last 30 years. And so cohort model means that when full-time freshmen enroll on our campuses, when they're coming in, we can raise tuition, the central fee, and on the Kent campus, we can raise room and board rates up to a certain amount that's determined by the state legislature. Then those students have all of those rates frozen for 4 years. And so if you think about when I got to Kent State in 2012, Lester Lefton told me that we were going to have a 2% increase of tuition, but that was 2% on all 42,000 students. This year, the state capped the tuition increase, room and board increase for incoming freshmen at a little over 3%. So that was 3% on roughly 5,000 students. So it's a difference of about $4 million. And then that's $4 million every year. That's really been the second squeeze. And the third of three squeezes, the third squeeze is our state support has failed to keep up with inflation, especially since COVID. Now, it's actually a double whammy because not only is the state subsidy of instruction, SSI, not keeping up with inflation, it's a fixed pie. So the amount of money stays the same, and then based on how many students are passing courses and how many students graduate, that determines how much of that pie you get. But the overall amount stays the same. And so when you enroll more students and they begin to pass more courses and they eventually graduate, your institution is going to get a bigger part of the pie, a bigger piece of the pie, and then other institutions will shrink because it's a fixed amount. And so when I arrived in Ohio in 2012, OSU enrolled around 7,000 new freshmen. So about 7,000 new freshmen enrolled at Ohio State's Columbus campus in 2012. This year, they enrolled 9,700 on the Columbus campus alone. So that's a 2,700 student growth. And we see the same growth at the University of Cincinnati. This year, they enrolled 8,500 freshmen. So as they grow, the state subsidy is being redivided in favor of these two schools. So 42% of the state subsidy now goes to just these two schools, Cincinnati and OSU. And so in that context, we're now in this odd situation where flat funding for the state subsidy of instruction is actually, it means $1 to $2 million a year less for Kent State because of that enrollment growth at those other institutions. So in a nutshell, those are three of the squeezes that have placed us in our current situation. Now, I was thinking about what I wanted to say for talking with Todd, and I thought, you know what? If I were all of you, I would think, a completely legitimate question would be, hey, look, you've known about these trends for some time. So, I mean, have you been asleep at the wheel? If you've known about these trends, if you've known that state subsidy of instruction is not keeping up with inflation, you've known about these population changes, you've known about the impact of the tuition cohort model. I mean, have you been asleep at the wheel? Well, no, we haven't been asleep at the wheel. And in fact, we have been reducing expenditures by tens of millions of dollars each and every year since 2017. And indeed, and I need to make this point very clearly, and indeed, these previous reductions are the reason why we have not had to enact the dramatic and hastily announced job eliminations we see at other universities, particularly in Ohio. So between 2017 and the start of COVID, these expenditure reductions and savings were almost all done at the level of the central administration. We made a specific effort to not ask other units across the system, campuses, academic colleges, we did not ask them to cut their budgets. So from 2017 until COVID, we made the cuts at the central administrative level, and we met our balanced budget needs by doing that. So 2017 to COVID, cutting every year millions of dollars, reducing our expenditures by millions of dollars, but being able to deliver balanced budgets by doing just that and not asking academic affairs, not asking campuses, not asking colleges to cut as well. Post-COVID, as the demographic trends and the impact of the tuition cohort model and the state underfunding state subsidy of instruction as those began to expand, as the impact of those began to expand, then we had to start administering across the board budget cuts, impacting all campuses and all units on all campuses, which then led to expenditure reductions additionally in the $9 to $12 million a year range. So if you add up the budget reductions of central administrative units, so let's think about 2017-ish through COVID. Think about cost reductions, efficiency measures, position eliminations, and the like. Since 2017, they add up conservatively, and this is a conservative amount, they add up conservatively to about $11.1 million a year that we've saved in central administration. So that's recurring every year. We have created $11 million conservatively a year in savings. So I'll just give you a few examples of what we did. Mark Politico and his team restructured our debt service. They took advantage of a dip in interest rates a few years ago, and that saves us year in and year out $2.2 million a year in lowered debt payments. Right coming out of COVID, our student life leaders ended our dining contract with Aramark. We brought dining in-house, and we save now year in and year out $2 million a year from doing that. You know, when I arrived at Kent State, I was surprised to find that administrators had a cell phone stipend. Since 2017, we've removed the cell phone stipends for all administrators, and we save $500,000 a year doing so. Kudos to Mark Politico and his team. They implemented a new process for purchasing electricity on the open market, and that new way of doing that saves $1.1 million a year. And now we have solar arrays on all of our campuses, and the solar array on the Kent campus saves us about $480,000 a year, another $120,000 or so on our regional campuses. And then finally, as an example, when we combined the vice presidency of DEI with human resources to create the division of people, culture, and belonging, we eliminated one vice presidency, and we're saving nearly $500,000 a year. Okay, so that's conservatively about $11 million a year in central administrative savings since 2017. Just answering my question about have we been a sleeper since 2017? No. So in addition to the above, compared to 2017, we now have 582 fewer employees. 582 fewer people work at Kent State system-wide now than in 2017. And we've done this through primarily 4 rounds of incentivized separations. Now, we no longer have the savings to pay the one-time costs for these incentivized separations. We do not have the resources to offer any more buyouts. No more of those are happening. But through position control and through these incentivized buyouts, we now have 12% fewer people working at Kent State than we did in 2017. And here's the point. That saves us $32 million a year. So had we not done these it saves us $21 million a year. So if you add together the central administrative actions since 2017 and hiring fewer employees, we're saving $32 million a year, each and every year. Had we not done these things, had we not reduced our expenditures by $32 million a year, had we not done these things, we would be in a budget meltdown right now. But we're not in a budget meltdown. We have challenges, which I'm going to continue to address here, but actions taken since 2017 have allowed us to think about what I call the soft landing, and I'll talk more about soft landing in my concluding remarks. By the way, academic affairs accounts for about 2/3 of the budget at Kent State University, and Transformation 28, which we can talk about later and which is really ably being led by Provost Tankersley, that's aimed at meeting the expense reductions that we need from academic affairs. But there's a lot of expense reductions going on outside of academic affairs. And just so you'll know, my fall faculty Senate meeting remarks will be outlining the expense reductions that we're doing in units other than academic affairs. And I can certainly talk about those at a future Talking with Todd. But now we really have reached the limit of our ability to make central budget cuts and cuts across the board. So now we're going to have to do things differently, and I'll discuss that more here in my closing remarks. So the first question I thought to myself was, have you been asleep at the wheel? And no, we haven't been asleep at the wheel. And saving $32 million a year has prevented us from arriving at a budget meltdown. And then I thought, well, gee, it would be completely logical to ask me as the president, well, if you weren't asleep at the wheel, why did we run a deficit for fiscal year 24, the fiscal year that just ended June 30th? So if you've read the budget message, you'll know that we did indeed run a deficit. And I said in my public remarks, it's the first deficit in 20 years, but we think it's the first deficit in at least 30 years. It was a $9.9 million deficit. So, you know, if you weren't asleep at the wheel and you were doing all those things, how come we ran a deficit for fiscal year 24? So on a budget of 680 million or so, we overspent by about 9.9 million. And there's really a couple of reasons. One is dramatic growth in healthcare spending, way beyond what we reasonably would have budgeted for. And secondly, 7 million more in repairs than we budgeted for. Okay, now as for repair costs, so what happened? Well, I mean, the simple answer, but it's also a true answer, is many more things broke down than we budgeted for. You know, particularly on the Kent campus, we had a rash of elevator breakdowns and costly repairs for those elevators. Indeed, in the end, we spent 7 million more in repairs than we budgeted for. Now, the good news on the for the Kent campus is that the state capital bill has funds in it to replace an elevator in the library, and over about 6 years to replace all 3 of those eventually, and to improve, upgrade elevators in other buildings as well. So part of the reason we ran a deficit is we had 7 million more in repairs than we budgeted for. Just more things broke than usual. And then there are exploding healthcare costs. Okay, so I'm going to just be patient with me while I spend quite a bit of time on this. I just want to make sure that I express clearly what happened here. So when it comes to exploding healthcare costs, I want to make clear that this is not a morality play. This is not a judgment. None of us, at least of all me, are blaming people for getting sick. None of us are blaming people for taking new classes of prescription medicines that carry new added costs. It's not about playing a blame game at all. After all, I mean, just like you, I'm a consumer of healthcare and prescription medicines. You know, I contracted an illness in early January that briefly I was in the hospital very briefly, and it took me 2 months to recover. And I was very happy that we have the healthcare benefits that we have. So I'm a consumer of our healthcare benefits just like you are, and I'm very appreciative of them and our prescription medicines. So when I say that our healthcare cost exploded and that's the other reason for our deficit, I'm not blaming anyone, but it's just a fact. It's a fact that our historic average of the number of medical cases in a year that exceed $400,000 in reimbursements, usually that's been around 10 or 12 a year because we're self-insured. We were double that number in fiscal year 24. Okay, so that's cases with reimbursements exceeding $400,000 were double our historic average, and we tend to budget towards when we build our budget, we build it towards the historic average. So it was double. In addition, there are new types of prescription medicines that we cover, and these have high costs, and these have exploded our pharmacy spend. So in the past, pharmacy reimbursements accounted for 17% of our healthcare expenditures. But last year in fiscal year 24, this increased to nearly 30%. In a very short amount of time, months, we went from a historic 17% of our healthcare expenditures in pharmacy reimbursements to 30% by the end of fiscal year 24. Look, we want to be an employer of choice. It's our core value to take care of one another. At the same time, if you look at our strategic roadmap, we also have as a core value the fiscal and financial health of our institution, its continued financial viability. So we have two core values that can be in tension with one another, right? We want to take care of everyone, and then at the same time, we have to maintain the financial viability and fiscal health of our institution. So, given these two, increases in healthcare spending, they're just a fact. They're just a reality. And it's just a fact that if we want to continue covering those costs, we'll have to balance these out by decreasing expenditures in other areas. So I noticed last week an industry survey said that only 1/4 of companies in the United States of America cover weight loss drugs in their health plans. Okay, 1/4 of companies in America cover weight loss drugs. Kent State covers those. And that's fine with me. I mean, if you think about being an employer of choice, that would be an indicator that we're leading and living up to our core values, taking care of one another. And absolutely, I can only imagine if you're in that field that you could show me evidence that if you're taking those drugs, you'll have fewer health problems that will be costly for us down the road. I totally get that. Nevertheless, it's just a fact that for example, these new weight loss drugs are very expensive. In the first 6 months of this calendar year, we reimbursed nearly $700,000 in weight loss prescriptions for our Kent State employees. And again, I don't have a problem with that. It's probably a good idea to do that, but that's not something we had budgeted for because they are new drugs and they're expanding in their popularity. So it's a puzzle or it's an arithmetic, and we just have to figure out what are we going to spend less for if those additional costs are going to become permanent. And by the way, it's not me, a historian in Latin America, that decides what we're going to do in these areas. I am advised by our Health Benefits Review Committee, and that includes representatives from AFSCME, that includes representatives from the AAUP tenure track group, that includes representatives from the non-tenure track bargaining unit, as well as administrative leaders from the Division of People, Culture, and Belonging and from Academic Affairs. So the Health Benefits Review Committee continues to study these issues, and I always appreciate their presentations and advice. Boy, I've been talking a lot today, and I apologize for that. I just want to finish with two final notes. One is about pulling off a soft landing, and the other is doing things differently as we implement the plan at Kent State. Okay, I talk a lot about soft landing. Soft landing has two elements. Without both elements happening, there's no soft landing. I'm just going to say that again. Soft landing has two elements. Without achieving both of them, there's no soft landing. First element is no annual deficits. We cannot run another annual deficit. We cannot spend by June 30th, 2025, more than we budgeted for. We can't do it. If we do that and we end the fiscal year with another deficit, then we have to move from a soft landing to the kinds of hastily announced and implemented job eliminations and program closures that we see at other universities. We announced last week or so hiring and travel freezes. These will help ensure that we do not end the fiscal year in a deficit. These will help ensure that we can still have a soft landing. Okay, the second element. Soft landing means that we reduce the number of employees, because we know we're going to have to reduce the number of employees because of those financial squeezes I opened with. We know we have to have fewer employees. We would prefer that we would achieve that goal of fewer employees through attrition as much as possible. And attrition means not replacing employees when they depart voluntarily. However, some occupied positions are going to be eliminated in the next 36 months. It's not possible that that won't happen. We reorganized the way we administer our regional campuses last year, and we eliminated 5.5 occupied positions. So five people, 5.5 positions, 5 people who had occupied jobs, they were in their jobs at Kent State, lost their jobs. I'm sure they didn't define that as a soft landing, right? So I'm talking about soft landing. We're trying to reduce the amount of employees through attrition as much as possible. But some people, 5 have already lost their jobs. And T28, Transformation 28, will mean more job eliminations. But again, we have some time for a glide path because we started making these reductions in 2017 when universities around us were deficit spending. So just want to say that we have a plan and we're implementing the plan, and particularly with the hiring and travel freezes, I'm beginning to have some confidence that we will not end fiscal year 25 in a deficit. So we need to stick to the plan. And when we stick to the plan, here's how I think the next 3 fiscal years at Kent State are going to look like. So we are in fiscal year 25. I think in fiscal year 26, we can largely expect a repeat of fiscal year 25, meaning really having to struggle and work hard to avoid an annual deficit, meaning potential hiring and travel freezes continuing for another year. I think in FY27, we'll still face challenges, but I think at that point, we'll be consolidating buildings. We'll be reducing the amount of money we spend on upkeep of buildings that are underused. I think we'll see the first round of Transformation 28. We'll have job attrition and the like. So I think by fiscal year 27, which begins on July 1st, 2026, we'll start to see it becoming easier to balance budget expenses with actual spending. Then, as we work our plan by fiscal year 28, meaning July 1st, 2027, we think we will have right-sized the university and we can deliver fiscal end-of-year balanced spending. So we're just going to have to do things differently. We're going to always be transparent. Don't expect you to agree with me, but understand that I'm always telling you things as I understand them. We need to be transparent, but we're going to have to do things differently. Doing things differently means the kinds of changes we made administering and staffing our regional campuses, which is saving us $900,000 a year. Doing things differently means Transformation 28. T28, the effort led by Provost Tankersley to reduce especially the number of administrative and staff positions on the Kent campus and elsewhere through a reduction in the number of administrative units. And doing things differently means reducing the number of buildings that we occupy in order to drive down what we spend maintaining these aging buildings. It means, for example, that we're going to tear down at some point the old College of Business building on the Kent campus because it's an inefficient building, and we can save somewhere around $700,000 a year in basic maintenance costs once that building is torn down. So I'll just finish by saying this, and you've been patient for the 30 minutes I've been talking. We've got a plan. I'm not saying these changes are going to be easy and painless. I am saying that we are addressing our issues. We've been doing so since 2017, and now we just have to keep at it. And I know we're going to succeed because of the success of our culture, the strength of our culture, because of our great leadership in the faculty senate and our unions. Super great working relationship and very helpful advice coming from those units. So I think that while others around us are going to flail, we're going to keep moving forward. Now, maybe it's not going to be a flash forward, but a strong, steady movement forward so that Kent State can keep doing all the great things that it continues to do. So I have spoken a lot, and I am now going to look at questions. And let me hit my new posts. Okay. Question is, what is your message to students regarding the university's finances and the proposed restructuring of academic colleges? I think the genius of T28, Transformation 28, I can't take credit for it. I really, it's not my invention. I admire the provost and her leadership and our faculty senate and union leadership working together. The genius of Transformation 28 is it's designed to avoid the kinds of program eliminations that you see at other universities. So by reducing our administrative costs, and because we've been making expense reductions since 2017, we've got a glide path long enough that we, with Transformation 28, will reduce administrative expenses enough, and we won't have to eliminate academic programs like you see other universities doing in Ohio and in other places. Yeah, what types of budget cuts are taking place in divisions other than academic affairs and student life? So I'm going to talk about this at length in my faculty senate remarks in November, and then certainly I can cover them in the next Talking with Todd. Suffice it to say that for the last 4 years, all units have been taking across the board cuts. But in addition to that, our units have been doing a lot of work to reduce their expenditures. I've talked enough today. I don't think I have enough time to go through all those. It's a good question. I promise you I'm going to talk to faculty and senate about it, and then I can talk to you about it in November. Attrition indicates a lack of strategic consideration. How can we have useful investment in keeping crucial university systems operational? Well, not necessarily does it reflect a lack of strategic consideration, because as we reduce the number of employees, I mean, we can redirect where we have employees to areas that are growing, that are strategic. Just saying that we're going to have fewer employees, it doesn't mean that we're not going to be strategic about where people are working. So we can, and in fact, the more that we can do that, the more we can have investment for crucial university system. But look, sometimes I can be too blunt, and the blunt response is this: if we don't make these reductions, we're not going to have any strategy, right? If you look at some of the fire sale cuts that are being made at other universities in the nation, those don't feel very strategic to me. So as long as we keep doing what we're doing, I think we actually will have that ability to be strategic. Yeah, let's talk about this. This is a good point. I just need to hit the C more because it's a longer. Okay, could you please consider not calling Ozempic, et cetera, weight loss drugs? I understand they are new and expensive, but I have been given the drug for my diabetes to control my A1C, not for weight loss, and I haven't lost weight on it. Thank you. Hey, look, great point. Ozempic is the prescription for Ozempic is for diabetes. It's often assigned off-label for weight loss, and there are drugs that we cover that are specifically for weight loss, and I'm okay with that. So I'm not calling them weight loss drugs in a pejorative sense at all, right? I mean, again, it's entirely possible that if you take these drugs and you avoid problems in the future, that's good for everybody. But I grant your point, and I appreciate your willingness to share that with me. Okay, with the realities of OSU and University of Cincinnati getting the bulk of SSI, despite our improving numbers, how are you and the other presidents advocating for changing how SSI is calculated and distributed? Well, SSI, and thanks for that question. I mean, SSI is a really complicated formula, but we have tended historically to do very well because there are weights that give you a larger SSI compensation for students that bring with them certain challenges. And we just excel at that. So there was a period when we went to performance funding about a decade ago, there was a 3 to 5, 6 year period where we increased our SSI amount more than any other university in the state. But then Cincinnati and Ohio State began to really kick in their enrollments, and now we're in the situation that we are in. I don't think I can give you a lot of hope for changing how SSI is determined, because then it really becomes kind of a vote of the 14 universities, public universities, and interactions with the state legislature. So I wouldn't want to hold that out as a real possibility. We do very forcefully advocate for increasing the amount of state funding. We've already been told that the governor's budget this year is likely to hold no increase in the state subsidy of instruction, but we are coming back with a counter proposal, and all of us that lead universities will be in Columbus a lot the next 6 months. So I appreciate that comment and question. Okay, good question. Here it is. Any considerations into no longer being a D1 school, part of the NCAA, reducing spending in the athletics department, considering we are not a focus for athletics and should be more focused on academics and research? Absolutely fair and good question. So let me just respond by saying that currently the budget of our intercollegiate athletics department is about $33 million. So that's about $33 million on a $704 million budget, which I think comes out to about 5% of our budget. That's not my answer yet. I just want to make sure we all understand the same numbers. Of that 33 million, something like 20 to 23 million comes from the institution, right? So it comes from base funds that central administration transfers to athletics, and it comes from a portion of the student central fee. So that accounts for about 60% of that 33 million. So are there considerations about no longer being a D1 school? I don't know that I would say that, but I will say this. There is so much change in the air with the NCAA right now, with the so-called House settlement. Everything is up in the air. So do I think a lot of changes are coming? Yes, I think a whole lot of changes are coming to intercollegiate athletics. I've made it clear that we're not going to spend more on intercollegiate athletics, and we really have to engage in meaningful cost control. But my feeling about intercollegiate athletics and why spending 5% of our budget is appropriate is this. If you think of all the things we do at a university, there's only a couple of opportunities regularly to bring thousands of us together at once as a community. I mean, you're never going to get, and I love theater. I go to every Kent State Kent theater production. Fantastic. They're usually standing room only. That's 400 people. But we can get 5, 6, 7, 10,000 people at a football game. And in the winter, when it's dark and it's cold outside, we can get up to 6,000 for a basketball game. It's our opportunity to come together as a community. But our change is coming. Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of them are just going to depend on what decisions are made nationally. Okay. We are looking down the road at attrition and such. From an employee standpoint, I hear let's do the same or more with less, which will likely cause a bit of burnout with folks who are already being overutilized. How are we going to avoid that? So, great work always done by our HR folks and our Division of People, Culture, and Belonging. And I know that Amwaba and her team will track those things in terms of, I like to say, let's not do the same with less. Let's not do more with less. Let's do things differently. So we're going to continue to look at ways to do things differently. Automation helps us do that. Perhaps AI in some areas can help us do that. So I really am trying to get away from this let's do more with less and let's do different. So let's do different as we right size our employment numbers. Okay. Lost my questions. How are we managing our public reputation amidst this challenging news? Wow. That is such a great question. And that's really why I began talking with Todd the way I began it today, because there are so many great things happening at Kent State University. And I can just go into a long list of things, ranging from 2 national publications recently ranking our fashion design and merchandising program as the 3rd best in the nation, or our student pilots who won the Air Race Classic, which is a flight competition around the country in the summer. We won it for the 3rd year in a row, and it's an outstanding accomplishment. So a lot of great things are happening. Our graduation rates are at historically high levels. Our 1st to 2nd year retention rates are at historically high levels. A lot of great research is happening. We're R1. And I think people understand that a lot of great things are happening. And my guess is that we are out there more than others about being transparent about what we're doing financially. And I'm hopeful that people will understand that we have a plan and we've got this and we're dealing with this at the same time that a lot of great things are happening. But you're right. We have to manage our reputation amidst this challenging news. Having these campuses look as great as they do is a real benefit. I get that all the time from parents and students who are visiting as juniors and seniors in high school. Okay. What if the financial factors you mentioned continue to worsen over the next few years? Enrollment, state subsidy of instruction, cost of health benefits, etc. Will we then have to modify our hopes for a soft landing? Well, I'm pretty confident in our planning. For example, in our 5-year plan, we budgeted for no increase in the state subsidy of instruction. And we basically budgeted for no increase in enrollment. So I feel like the numbers we've been using for budgeting have been pretty realistic. Now, we did get caught by surprise with the number of maintenance breaks that we had to fix this year. I'll grant you that. And then these new class of prescription drugs caught us by surprise. But I think by and large that our budgeting numbers for 5-year budgeting are pretty strong. I'm not as concerned about that. I'm more concerned, honestly, about the public levels of public distrust of higher education. Now that does worry me. Worries me that fewer high school graduates are opting to go to college. But I think as long as we keep offering this really great supportive community and these great campuses that look so great, they're so welcoming, I think that will help us as well. Boy, I actually don't understand why and what it means to be self-insured. The question is, why are we self-insured? I'm sure that we have the system that we do because it's the most efficient and effective in terms of cost. But I'm just going to admit to you, and now I'm going to, when I hang up today, I'm going to ask Mark Politaico what that means, and we can come back and talk about that at the next Talking with Todd. I don't have a good answer for you about why we are self-insured, but I'll certainly come back to you and talk about that. Okay, we have oh, here's my new post. Sorry, I couldn't find my new posts. Okay. Regarding T28, the plan focuses on reducing administrative staff who are essential for running the university. Why aren't we also considering reduction in faculty? Well, we are, and we already have. So remember I mentioned that if you compare the number of employees we have now compared to 2017, you remember that I said that we have 582 fewer employees. And nearly 300 of those were faculty. So we have 300 fewer faculty now than we did in 2017. And with attrition and with hiring freezes, with position control, we'll just be very careful about hiring going forward. So we've already seen a reduction in nearly 300 faculty since 2017. Okay. Some department, oh no, I already read that one, sorry. Oh, here it is, sorry. Sometimes it's hard to find my new post button. Okay, it seems that our financial health is determined by tuition. What is being done to increase income from other sources such as research and patents since we're an R1 school? Well, I'm not going to speak to research and patents because I just don't have any of those numbers in front of me, but we are always engaged in efforts to increase revenues. So we did that, for example, with the American Academy and that program in Brazil. That's a big revenue generator for us. We've seen some pretty noticeable increases in revenue generated by using our campus by outside, in the summer by summer camps and the like. Research and patents, there is some of that. That's a pretty rarefied world. And I can come back to you and talk to you in another talking with Todd with that. But we have definitely engaged in a series of measures that generate more revenue for us, and we'll continue to do that. But you're right. I mean, tuition and fees are a big source of our revenues. One thing I should say here, because I'm looking at my own image in the computer, is I've always wanted to say that behind me, this piece of artwork is by Janice Lessman Moss. So Janice Lessman Moss is no stranger to any of you. She's a retired professor in our School of Art and an award-winning artist. And I just love that piece. It's called All Four Seasons in One Day. I just love that. I just noticed it right now. And Janice, if you're out there listening, thank you for your talent and your years of service to our students as a professor. What is your advice to those who are, for example, currently in Kent's HIED program regarding beginning a career in the field during a difficult time like this? Okay, look, I'm going to guess that HIED is something to do with higher ed administration. I just don't know that abbreviation. So I'm going to assume that this is our higher ed admin program. I mean, universities aren't going away. And universities are going to need more than ever people that have really great training. And I guess my advice would be to really, as you go through your program, to make sure you get a good education in and grounding in higher ed finances. Because, I mean, here's the thing. It doesn't matter what field you were trained in. I'm a historian of Latin America. When you get into higher ed administration, you de facto have to become educated in finances. So I don't think you should worry about there not being jobs. I think you will do yourself a favor by looking into all opportunities to familiarize yourself with higher ed finances. Question here is, how much are we projecting maybe saved via the hiring and travel freeze? Right about $9 to $10 million. So somewhere between 8 to 10 million. I think it'll be more like 9 to 10 with those two combined. And that, if last year is an indication, that will give us some cushion for avoiding a deficit this year. And that's very helpful that you asked that. How can we keep employee morale up when we hear about budget deficits, a need to reduce expenses, hiring and travel freeze, etc.? Well, I mean, you could probably help me and give me advice on how to do that, how to keep up employee morale. I mean, what I would say is, look, we have a plan and we've been working on this since 2017. And it's precisely because I want to make this clear. It's precisely because we've been working this plan since 2017 that we've been able to offer raises, and now I'll talk about non-represented employees, of 3%, then 3%, then 2%. Of course, we'd have liked to have done more, but there are plenty of universities nationwide that didn't give raises in these difficult times. So I think one way to keep up employee morale is to understand that we're being transparent, that we're working the plan. You know what the situation is. There's not going to be surprises about it. You're informed. Read the budget message. I know it's a long budget message. I totally get that, but you're now as informed as anybody else in our community, and hopefully that will help your morale. There's not going to be a surprise announcement any in the next weeks and months because we're working our plan. So I appreciate that question. Okay. I think there's a word missing in this question. And I've got 4 minutes left. So I'm going to kind of recompose this question because I think there's a word missing in it. But the high RCM, I think it's the high RCM rate, has made it difficult for many programs to create avenues for profit and in turn recruitment. And are there talks about restructuring the taxing model to support programs and their possible advancement with extra funds? Yeah, and by the way, this is a lot of inside baseball. So if you're not familiar with academic affairs and the responsibility-centered management budgeting approach at Kent State, you will not have followed that. But we are going to highly modify, essentially transform the responsibility-centered management approach. It's really too complicated. There are various problems with it that create sort of artificial scarcities in some places. So my answer, which I don't know, maybe this is satisfactory to your question, maybe it's not, is that we are Provost Tankersley and Senior Vice President and CFO Tankersley and their teams are working on basically a redo and complete transformation of the responsibility-centered management approach. So stay tuned for that. Okay, I think what I'm going to do here, because I don't see additional questions, it's a little balky today on refreshing my questions. So what I'm going to do here in the last 2 minutes that I have is to sort of address what a lot of people are talking about, which is morale and where do we go as an institution. So it would not be transparent nor honest for me to say that we don't have challenges. It would not be transparent for me to say that everything's going great at Kent State from a budgetary standpoint. I am being fully transparent. I am explaining the world truthfully as I understand it. When I say that, we have a plan in place. Since 2017, we have reduced expenditures just in a couple areas by $32 million a year. With Transformation 28, with other activities that I'll talk about at Faculty Senate in November, we continue to make those reductions. And as we continue to do that work steadily, we will avoid the hastily announced dramatic program eliminations and unit eliminations that we see elsewhere. So Kent State continues to be just the great place that it is. And I'm not being Pollyannish about this. I'm going to end today with where I began. And that is, I had lunch last week with a dozen student leaders. The most amazing 12 students you can imagine. We had the president of the Flash Activities Board. We had the president of Hillel, We had the president of the Students for Justice in Palestine. We had the president of the Muslim Student Association. We had the president of the Black Engineering Students. And you could not go through that lunch and conversation and not understand that we are incredibly fortunate to have the students that we have and that we make a difference. You make a difference. Each one of you makes a difference in the lives of these students. Maybe one of the most enjoyable things I do is I go to the Alumni Awards banquet on the Friday of homecoming and I meet these amazing graduates. That's what we're doing. I mean, on homecoming this year, I met the chief chemist for the United States Army. She has the highest security clearance of any woman in the United States Army. Chief chemist for the United States Army. Proud, 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 proud Kent State graduate. We're making a difference. We're in a tense moment as a nation. We're in a tense moment as a state. We're in a tense moment as a community. We face our budget issues, but we do so confident in the knowledge that every day that we come to work, we make those students more likely to succeed. You do that. I don't do that. Each of you listening does that. So I'll just finish by saying thank you for what you do. That's heartfelt, and go Flashes. See you, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.